Steve Ward, President, Centennial Bank and Trust. When we're talking to business owners, there's probably 5 common themes that we're hearing in the marketplace, and the first one is access to skilled labor force, ability for the companies to find qualified employees. There's a lot of competition for employees today, and as a result, it's difficult to find the skilled labor force. We're also hearing comments about access to capital. It's a common theme in businesses and an ongoing concern as to their ability to work with banks and to be able to get financing for their needs. The other area that is really prevalent, and it's actually increasing, is the exposure to fraud, in particular payment fraud. We're seeing an increase of that occurring on a regular basis throughout the country. The other area is just technology and how fast technology is increasing, and then the cost for the companies to be able to implement the new technologies. And then lastly, that the common theme that we hear from business owners is just the ability to become more efficient. They have a regular basis of being exposed to increased cost, increased competition, and so they have to become more efficient on a daily basis and to be able to drive down their cost. Fraud is actually a multifaceted approach to be able to reduce that risk. And one starts with the company in itself. They need to be able to do their due diligence on wire transfer requests, ACH requests, those types of things. They need to make sure they understand who's requesting these payments, and then make sure there's nothing unusual. So no, in particular, a company sends in a wire transfer request through email. Does that company normally send in their request through email? If the answer is yes, okay. If no, then I would look into that. Secondarily, they should always double check the request. So if a company sends in the request via email, they should call the company back. Use the telephone number that they have on file, call the company back directly to verify that they did send in the email request. So that'd be the first one, would be just their own due diligence. Second one is dual control. It's always helpful to have a couple people take a look at something to make sure that it's accurate. And then don't feel pressure. Just don't get it out. Make sure everything's right before you go ahead and initiate that wire. Then thirdly, I would work with the bank. They definitely need to have a close working relationship with the bank to help the bank, and the bank can help them from a standpoint of putting in products and services such as positive pay, ACH alert, those types of services to help mitigate the risk, as well as help the bank will understand their payment process and their systems and make recommendations as to how they can tighten up some controls. Throughout the company's life cycle, access to capital is critical. It's the lifeblood of the company. And as a result, there's different levels of capital that's available. Early on, when the beginning stages of company at their onset, typically that capital comes from the ownership of the company or friends or family. And as the company matures and develops a stable cash flow, they will then start working with a bank, to either get traditional financing, senior financing, or maybe even some government guaranteed type of financing through the SBA. So you need to be working with your financial institutions and helping educate them as to what your goals and objectives are, and let them educate you as to where you're going to, how you're going to access that capital to help meet your growth demands. Over time, as time goes on, you may have an opportunity to do an acquisition, and as a result, there's some intangibles that need to be financed. So your access to capital may be talking to mezzanine type of lenders, subordinate lenders in conjunction with the bank. So there's various levels. I would just say be proactive with your bank. Let them help you get access to that capital. Let them work with you as to help educate your company as to what will be those requirements on a go-forward basis. One of the issues that we see facing companies is fraud, and in particular payment fraud. As I mentioned earlier, the payment fraud exposure to companies is rampant today. I'm seeing stats of anywhere close to 3/4 of companies being exposed to fraud in either an attempt or an actual fraud situation. In particular, wire transfers and then secondarily the ACH aspect of the payment system. Check fraud has been out there for a long time, but as the use of more technology is coming into play, you see more wire transfer fraud occurring as well as ACH. The exposure to companies, the criminals are clever. And so we see that the use of the email system and spoofing of emails, and they look like they are legitimate emails from a legitimate company. Turns out it's a fraudster who's trying to take money from the company. So what we recommend is that it's a multifaceted approach. Working with a bank is, in my opinion, obviously I'm biased as the banker, but is one of the key components for a successful company. They have multiple people that they can work with. Their attorneys, their accountants, their insurance brokers, and the bank is another one of their trusted advisor. A lot of companies have close working relationships with banks, and that's great. Some companies, though, don't realize that the bank is there to help them. And being one that kind of be proactive in your communication with the bank, understanding, letting the bank know what your future goals are, and then the bank can help you achieve those financial goals. Letting the bank, if there is bad news, let the bank know that there's going to be something bad coming down. But banks don't want to be surprised, and they can work with you around those issues that are popping up. Companies go through cycles, and there's ebbs and flows in business. Banks are aware of that. It's just the surprise that gets them nervous. I would work closely with my banker and understand what the bank's requirements are. So if I'm doing an expansion, my company's expanding, I'd be with my banker before that expansion occurs, say, hey, this is what we're thinking about, and as a result, what do you need from us? Maybe additional financial reporting, and maybe some projections, and maybe a litany of things. But this way, you're proactive as opposed to reactive. And when the time is, the need is here, that's not the time to all of a sudden start asking those questions. So have a close working relationship with your financial institution.